The massive alien ships appeared out of nowhere. One moment, the stars shone peacefully in the black emptiness of space. The next, 5 crystal vessels surrounded the small human exploration ship. Commander Sam Wright of the Earth ship Dauntless gripped the arms of his command chair. After 15 years in deep space, he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. "Sir, they're hailing us," said Paul, the young communications officer. His voice shook slightly. "On screen," Wright ordered, straightening his uniform. The screen flickered to life, revealing a tall being with blue skin that seemed almost transparent. 6 fingers moved gracefully as the alien adjusted something off-screen. When it spoke, its voice came through in perfect English. "Greetings, humans. I am Krall Zovex of the Valdurian High Council. Welcome to our space." Wright nodded politely. "Thank you for your welcome. I am Commander Sam Wright of the United Earth Alliance vessel Dauntless. We come in peace, seeking friendship with new civilizations." The alien's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach its large, pupil-less eyes. "How quaint. Your species has only recently learned to travel between stars. Yes, we have been doing so for 50,000 years." Grace Howard, the ship's language expert, whispered to Wright. "They're scanning our databases, sir. Cultural information, mostly." Wright nodded slightly. The alien's tone was friendly enough, but there was something underneath it, a hint of superiority that made his skin crawl. "We would be honored to learn from your civilization," Wright said carefully. On the main screen, images from Earth's history began to appear. The Valdurians were indeed exploring the ship's cultural database. Ancient monuments, wars, art, and literature flashed by, until they reached mythology. Hercules lifting the world, Beowulf fighting Grendel, Paul Bunyan creating the Grand Canyon, Robin Hood shooting an arrow that split another arrow. Strange sounds came through the speakers, high-pitched tones that the translator couldn't quite process. Wright realized with a start that the aliens were laughing. "These stories," Krall said, his blue face glowing with amusement. "Your people actually told these tales of impossible strength and magical powers." Wright felt his face grow warm. "They're legends, yes. They taught values and inspired generations of humans." "Fascinating," Krall replied, not bothering to hide his amusement. "All young species need their childish stories, I suppose, before they discover the true nature of the universe." Grace Howard stepped forward. "And does your species have no cultural stories, Ambassador Krall?" The alien's body stiffened slightly. "We have history, human. Actual events, perfectly recorded. Not fairy tales." Wright exchanged glances with Howard. Whatever these aliens thought of humanity, at least contact had been made peacefully. That was something. "We would very much like to learn about your history," Wright said. Krall seemed to consider this for a moment. "Perhaps that can be arranged. Our vessels will escort your ship to a proper meeting location. Follow closely. Your primitive navigation systems may struggle with the journey." As the communication ended, Wright turned to his crew. "Well, they're not the friendliest aliens we could have met, but at least they're talking." Howard nodded thoughtfully. "They seem very proud of their history, almost defensive about it." "Let's tread carefully," Wright said, watching the crystal ships through the view screen. "Something tells me there's more to the Valdurians than they want us to see." The Dauntless moved forward, surrounded by alien vessels that sparkled like diamonds against the blackness of space. First contact had been made, but understanding was still a long way off. 2 days passed as the Dauntless followed the Valdurian ships through space. The crew watched in amazement as the alien vessels moved in perfect formation, leaving trails of blue light behind them. "They're showing off," said Linda Morgan, the ship's science officer. She hadn't slept much since first contact, too busy studying the aliens' technology. Commander Wright nodded. "Probably. But I'd show off too if my ships could move like that." The main screen lit up, showing Krall Zovex's blue face. "Commander Wright, my government has made a decision. We wish to invite you and your crew to Valduria Prime, our homeworld. Wright tried to hide his surprise. This was unexpected. We would be honored. Ambassador Krall. Good. We are approaching a jump point. Your ship will need to follow exactly in our wake. The journey might be uncomfortable for beings unused to dimensional shifting. Before Wright could ask what dimensional shifting meant, the communication ended. The crystal ships ahead began to glow brighter. Sir, Paul called from his station. Energy readings are off the charts. Follow them exactly, Wright ordered. Whatever happens, stay in formation. The space in front of the alien ships seemed to fold inward, creating what looked like a tunnel of swirling light. The Valdurian vessels slipped inside, and the Dauntless followed. For 10 terrible seconds, everyone on the bridge felt like they were being pulled in different directions, colors no human had ever seen flashed before their eyes. Then, suddenly, it was over. Status report, Wright gasped, fighting the urge to throw up. All systems normal, Frank Wilson said from the security station. But sir, look. The view screen showed a stunning sight. A massive blue-green planet with 3 moons, surrounded by thousands of orbiting structures that sparkled in the light of a golden sun. Valduria Prime, Krall's voice announced proudly. The heart of our civilization for 30,000 years. As they approached the planet, enormous cities became visible on the surface, vast structures of crystal and metal that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. It's beautiful, Grace Howard whispered. The Dauntless was guided to a docking station bigger than anything humans had ever built. When the crew stepped out of their ship, they found themselves in a vast hall where dozens of Valdurians waited. Krall stepped forward. Welcome to our world. You have arrived at a fortunate time. Tomorrow begins our greatest celebration, the Festival of Heroes. Festival of Heroes? Wright asked. Yes, every 5 cycles, we honor Vexer the Mighty, the greatest Valdurian who ever lived. 10,000 cycles ago, he saved our entire species from extinction. Grace's eyes lit up. A cultural celebration. May we attend? Krall seemed pleased by her interest. Of course. In fact, you will be our honored guests. It's rare for outsiders to witness our most sacred traditions. As they walked through the docking station, Wright noticed other Valdurians watching them with curious eyes. Some seemed friendly, others wary. Ambassador, Wright said carefully, we're grateful for your invitation. Perhaps we could share some of our own traditions as well. Krall made that strange, almost smile again. Your legends, you mean? That might be amusing for some of our scholars. Though I must tell you, Commander, what we celebrate is not myth. Our historical records are perfect and complete. Every feat of Vexer the Mighty is documented fact. A young Valdurian approached, bowing to Krall before speaking. The High Council awaits the humans. Ambassador. Krall nodded. Come, Commander Wright. The Council wishes to meet the representatives of Earth before the festival begins. As they followed Krall deeper into the alien city, Grace whispered to Wright, they're very certain about their history, aren't they? Wright nodded slightly, almost too certain. I wonder what this Festival of Heroes will reveal. The central plaza of the Valdurian capital stretched farther than the human eye could see. Millions of blue-skinned aliens filled the space, their bodies creating a living sea that rippled as they moved. Towering crystal spires surrounded the plaza, catching the light of the setting sun and breaking it into countless rainbow patterns. Wright and his small team from the Dauntless stood on a raised platform near the center stage. Though they were given a place of honor, Wright couldn't shake the feeling they were being displayed like exotic animals. Look at the architecture, Frank whispered, pointing to massive arches that seemed to float without support. Those structures should collapse under their own weight. Linda nodded, recording everything with her small scanner. Their understanding of physical forces must be completely different from ours. A hush fell over the crowd as an ancient Valdurian slowly approached the central stage. His blue skin was faded to almost white with age, and elaborate patterns of light pulsed across his body. Elder Xerax, Krull explained quietly to the humans. He has lived for nearly 1,000 cycles and is our most respected historian. The old Valdurian raised his six-fingered hands, and the crowd grew completely silent. Today we honor Vexer the Mighty. Elder Xerax began, his voice surprisingly strong. 10,000 cycles ago, when darkness threatened to swallow our people forever, Vexer stood alone against the scourge. As he spoke, massive holographic images appeared above the plaza, showing a tall, powerful Valdurian wielding what looked like a sword made of pure light. Vexer carried our sacred crystal across the Forbidden Valley, where the air itself burns the skin, Elder Xerax continued. He fought and defeated the 1,000 warriors of Kelthra in a battle that lasted 60 days without rest. The holographic images changed to show the hero fighting against impossible odds, his body glowing with power. When our world faced destruction from the Death Comet, Vexer used his mighty strength to create our first interstellar drive in a single day, allowing our ancestors to escape certain doom. Grace leaned closer to Wright. "This sounds more like mythology than history," she whispered. Wright nodded slightly. "Exactly what I was thinking." The ceremony continued with young Valdurians performing dramatic recreations of Vexer's greatest achievements. According to the performances, this single hero had not only defeated armies and invented revolutionary technology, but had also physically moved a moon to save a colony from destruction. "Is it just me?" Wright whispered to Grace. "Or do these historical facts seem a bit exaggerated?" "Very similar to our own myths," she replied quietly. "The difference is they presented as absolute truth." Krell approached the human delegation, his skin glowing with pride. "Impressive, isn't it? Every feat you see actually happened, exactly as shown. Unlike your human legends, ours are perfectly documented facts." Wright struggled to maintain a diplomatic expression. "Quite remarkable achievements for a single individual." "Indeed," Krull replied. "Your Earth heroes, your Hercules, your Beowulf, were mere stories. But Vexer was real. His accomplishments are beyond question." As the performance reached its climax, Wright noticed something unexpected. While most Valdurians watched with reverent awe, a small group of older aliens at the edge of the official platform seemed uncomfortable. One ancient Valdurian in particular, wearing elaborate robes covered in strange symbols, watched the humans' reactions with keen interest. "Who is that?" Wright asked Krell, nodding toward the elderly alien. Krell's expression changed slightly. "High Scholar Tavik, the keeper of our historical archives, and, it is said, a direct descendant of Vexer himself." As if hearing his name, the old Valdurian turned to meet Wright's gaze. In that brief moment of eye contact, Wright saw something unexpected, a look of apology, and perhaps shame. The morning after the festival's opening ceremony, the human delegation received a special invitation. They would be allowed to visit the Valdurian Historical Archives, a rare honor that even most Valdurians never experienced. "This is incredible," Grace said as they followed Krull through crystal hallways that seemed to glow from within. "We'll be the first humans to see actual alien historical records." The archive building was a perfect sphere, floating slightly above the ground. Inside, the walls were lined with thousands of glowing crystals, each containing what Krell explained were perfect memories of Valdurian history. An older female Valdurian greeted them at the entrance. "I am Milix, Chief Archivist. Welcome to the Hall of Truth, humans." The room she led them into was massive and circular. In the center stood a control panel surrounded by hovering seats. "Here we store the unaltered facts of our civilization," Milix said proudly. "Unlike your species, we have kept perfect records since our earliest days." Linda stepped forward. "How do you record these memories?" "Our ancestors developed memory capture technology over 20,000 cycles ago," Milix explained. "Every important event is recorded directly from the minds of those who witnessed it." Wright noticed that Milix seemed to be choosing her words very carefully. "We would like to learn more about Vexer," Wright said. His accomplishments were quite impressive in yesterday's ceremony. Melix nodded and touched the control panel. The air around them filled with three-dimensional images of a tall, powerful Valdurian. "Vexor the Mighty saved our civilization during the Great Darkness," she explained. "He defeated the Scourge single-handedly and created technologies that made our current prosperity possible." As the display showed these amazing feats, Linda was studying her scanner intently. "May I ask how old these specific records are?" Linda asked. Melix seemed surprised by the question. "These are from the 8th cycle after Vexor's death. And do you have records from during his lifetime?" Linda pressed. After a moment's hesitation, Melix adjusted the controls. "These are our earliest records of Vexor." The images change, showing a much more ordinary-looking Valdurian. While still clearly a leader, this version of Vexor seemed smaller, less godlike. Grace noticed something immediately. This early version shows him working with a team to develop the interstellar drive, but in yesterday's ceremony, he created it alone. Wright watched Melix carefully. The archivist's skin color changed slightly, a sign of discomfort he had learned. "Historical understanding evolves with deeper study," Melix said stiffly. Before Wright could ask another question, the doors to the archive room slid open. The elderly Valdurian Wright had noticed at the ceremony entered slowly, supported by a floating platform. Every Valdurian in the room immediately bowed their heads. Krell looked surprised and a little nervous. "High Scholar Tevik," Melix announced. "This is unexpected. We are merely showing our visitors some basic historical." "I can see what you are showing them," the ancient Valdurian interrupted. His voice was soft, but carried a clear authority. "And I can see they have questions." Tavik moved his platform closer to the humans. His eyes, much paler blue than other Valdurians, studied them intently. "You doubt our historical accounts," he said. It wasn't a question. Wright chose his words carefully. "We find them fascinating, High Scholar. On Earth, we also have stories of great heroes." "Stories," Tavik repeated. "Yes. That word is important." He turned to Krell and Melix. "Leave us. I wish to speak with the humans alone." Krell looked like he wanted to object, but simply bowed and left with Melix. When the door closed, Tavik sighed deeply. "Commander Wright, I have been watching your reactions since you arrived. You see contradictions in our records, don't you?" Wright nodded slowly. "The earliest records seem different from what is celebrated today." Tavik's mouth formed the Valdurian version of a smile. "You are diplomatic. Let me be direct. The story has grown with time. I believe the same happened with your Hercules and Beowulf, yes." "Yes," Wright admitted, surprised by the alien's honesty. "There is something important you must know," Tavik said quietly. "Something few Valdurians know. But first, we must go somewhere more private." High Scholar Tavik led the humans through a hidden door at the back of the archives. The passage was narrow and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the grand, shining halls they had seen so far. Wright had to duck his head to avoid hitting the low ceiling. "Few know this place exists," Tavik said softly. "It holds our true history." After walking for several minutes, they entered a small plain room with simple stone walls. A single crystal table stood in the center, surrounded by basic chairs. Nothing about this space matched the grandeur of Valdurian architecture they had seen elsewhere. "Please, sit," Tavik said, lowering his hovering platform to table height. "What I am about to share has never been told to outsiders." The humans exchanged nervous glances but sat down. Tavik placed his six-fingered hand on the table's surface, and a soft blue light began to glow between his fingers. "I am the 20,000th keeper of the true records," he said, a direct descendant of Vexor himself. The air above the table shimmered, revealing images of the Valdurian who looked nothing like the mighty hero from the festival. This Vexor was of average height and build, with kind eyes and an intelligent face. "This is the real Vexor," Tavik said. "My ancestor was a scientist and explorer who made important discoveries. He led a team that found a cure for the disease we call the Scourge. He helped develop early space travel. He was brave and smart, but he was just a person, not a god. Grace leaned forward. But why hide the truth? Why create the myth? Tavik's skin dimmed slightly. What Wright had learned was a sign of sadness. 8,000 cycles ago, a terrible plague nearly destroyed our civilization. Millions died. Society was breaking apart. Our leaders decided that people needed more than facts. They needed hope, a hero larger than life. So they rewrote history, Linda said. Tavik nodded. They took the stories of Vexor and made them bigger, more impressive. Each generation added to the legend until the real person disappeared behind the myth. Wright ran a hand through his hair. But your people mocked our legends while believing their own. Most Valdurians, even our scholars and diplomats, believe the myths are true, Tavik explained. Only a small council knows the real history. We maintain the actual records while allowing the public to believe the legend. Why are you telling us this? Frank asked, speaking for the first time. Isn't this dangerous for you? Tavik's eyes seemed to look beyond them, at something distant. Because tomorrow will change everything. Our greatest living hero, Commander Jaxel, has studied your human cultures since you arrived. He has spoken with me at length about truth and mythology. Tavik touched the table again, and a new image appeared. A strong, young Valdurian in a military uniform. Jaxel is scheduled to give the final speech at the festival tomorrow. He plans to reveal the truth about Vexor to our entire civilization. That could cause chaos, Wright said, suddenly understanding why Tavik looked so troubled. Yes, but Jaxel believes the time has come. He says meeting your species has shown him that societies can respect their legends without believing them literally. Linda looked confused. But why would our arrival trigger such a dramatic change? Tavik's skin brightened slightly, a sign of amusement. Because when Kral and others mock your childish myths, some of us recognize the irony. We were laughing at stories very similar to our own, while claiming ours were factual history. Grace nodded slowly. So tomorrow, Tavik said, billions of Valdurians will learn that their greatest hero was not what they believed. Some will be angry. Some will be lost. But Jaxel believes, and I agree, that truth is better than comfortable lies. Wright looked at the image of the real Vexor. Sometimes the most heroic act is telling the truth, no matter how difficult. Tavik's eyes met Wright's. Exactly, Commander. That is why Jaxel may be remembered as an even greater hero than Vexor himself. The final day of the Festival of Heroes brought the largest gathering Wright had ever seen. Billions of Valdurians packed the enormous plaza, with countless more watching through floating screens in the sky. The air buzzed with excitement. The human delegation had been moved to a special platform right next to the main stage. Wright noticed many Valdurians studying them with curious eyes. High Scholar Tavik approached them before the ceremony began. His skin looked paler than before, and his movements were slower. "Are you well, High Scholar?" Wright asked quietly. "I did not sleep," Tavik admitted. "What happens today will change my world forever." Grace offered a sympathetic smile. "Change can be frightening, but often necessary." "Commander Wright," Tavik said, his voice barely above a whisper, "no matter what happens today, know that your visit has helped our civilization face an important truth." Before Wright could respond, trumpets sounded, or something very like trumpets. The crowd fell silent as Elder Zurax appeared on stage. "Today marks the final celebration of our greatest hero," the Elder announced. "As is tradition, we will hear from our most honored living warrior, Commander Jaxel, decorated veteran of the border wars and protector of the outer colonies." The crowd erupted in cheers as a tall, muscular Valdurian walked onto the stage. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial robes worn by others, he wore a simple military uniform with a few medals pinned to his chest. His face was serious, his posture straight and proud. "My fellow Valdurians," Jaxel began, his deep voice carrying across the plaza without need for amplification. For 10,000 cycles, we have celebrated Vexer the Mighty. We have taught our children that he moved mountains, defeated armies alone, and created technologies through sheer force of will. The crowd murmured in agreement, some calling out praise for Vexer. Jaxel raised his hand for silence. Today, I stand before you to speak a difficult truth. He paused, looking across the vast audience. Our most sacred historical accounts are not entirely accurate. Complete silence fell over the gathering. Wright could almost feel the shock rippling through the crowd. Since meeting the humans, Jaxel continued, gesturing toward the Earth delegation, I have spoken at length with High Scholar Tavik. Together we examined the original historical records, the true records of Vexer's life. Krell burst forward from a nearby platform, his face flushed dark blue with anger or panic. Commander Jaxel, this is not appropriate for. Security officers moved quickly, gently but firmly blocking Krell from approaching the stage. Wright noticed Tavik making a small signal with his hand. Vexer was real, Jaxel continued, undisturbed. He was a scientist, explorer, and leader who made great contributions to our civilization. But he did not defeat the scourge alone. He led a team of brilliant minds who together developed the cure. He did not single-handedly create our first interstellar drive. He coordinated thousands of researchers across multiple worlds. The silence was now broken by confused whispers. Some Valdurians looked angry, others bewildered. Vexer's true greatness, Jaxel said, his voice growing stronger, was not in superhuman abilities, but in his capacity to inspire others. He showed that together, we could solve problems no individual could face alone. A Valdurian in the crowd stood up. Why tell us this now? Why destroy our beliefs? Jaxel looked directly at the questioner. Because beliefs based on falsehoods are fragile. And because in our pride, we mocked the myths of another species while clinging to myths of our own. He gestured again toward the humans. These visitors from Earth taught us something important without saying a word. Their legends, which we laughed at, served the same purpose as ours. They inspire, they teach values, they unite people. The difference is, they recognize their legends as stories that carry truth, not as literal history. Wright watched as Jaxel's words sank in. Some Valdurians looked angry, but many more seemed thoughtful. Beside him, Tavik's skin began to glow with a peaceful light. Today, Jaxel concluded, we honor Vexer not with exaggerated tales, but with the truth of his actual accomplishments. And in doing so, we become worthy of his legacy. The week following Commander Jaxel's speech brought dramatic changes to Valdurian society. The initial shock had given way to intense discussions on every street corner and in every home. Some Valdurians protested, claiming their heritage had been insulted. Others embraced the truth with surprising enthusiasm. Wright watched it all unfold from the Dauntless, which remained in orbit around Valduria Prime. Their departure, originally scheduled for the day after the festival, had been delayed by a personal request from High Scholar Tavik. Commander, we need more time with your delegation, Tavik had said. My people are struggling to understand what this means for our culture. Now, 7 days later, Wright sat in a meeting room in the capital city. Around the table were Tavik, Jaxel, and several Valdurian scholars. Even Krell was there, though he spoke little and avoided eye contact with the humans. The transition has been smoother than I expected, Jaxel said, his skin glowing with what Wright had learned was the Valdurian expression of cautious optimism. Yes, there is anger, but there is also relief. Many secretly question the more incredible aspects of our mythology. Tavik nodded slowly. For too long, we buried truth under layers of exaggeration. With each generation, Vexer became less real and more like a god. Wright leaned forward. On Earth, we went through similar processes with our own legends. The difference is, we eventually separated mythology from history. How do humans manage this transition? A young female scholar asked. Without losing the value of your stories. Grace answered, We recognized that legends don't need to be factually true to contain meaningful truth. Hercules wasn't real, but his story teaches courage and the overcoming of impossible challenges. The Valdurians considered this, their skin patterns shifting in thought. Perhaps, Jaxel said, we focused too much on whether Vexor could move mountains, and not enough on why those stories mattered to us. Outside the meeting room window, Wright could see ordinary Valdurians going about their daily lives. Street performers were already telling new versions of Vexor's story, more realistic, but no less inspiring. Your visit changed everything, Tavik said to Wright. When Krell and others mocked your legends while promoting our own, Jaxel saw the contradiction immediately. Krell finally spoke, his voice quiet. I owe you an apology, Commander Wright. I truly believed our legends were perfect historical accounts. My laughing at your mythology was unkind and unwise. Wright smiled. Apology accepted, Ambassador. We all face moments when we must choose between comfortable beliefs and difficult truths. As the meeting concluded, Jaxel approached Wright privately. We would like to establish a permanent cultural exchange with Earth. There is much we can learn from each other. I think that's an excellent idea, Wright replied. Our differences make us interesting to each other, but our similarities make understanding possible. On their final evening on Valduria Prime, the humans attended a small ceremony in the plaza where Jaxel had made his historic speech. What was once a celebration of mythic feats had transformed into something more thoughtful, a recognition of real achievements and the power of cooperation. A young Valdurian approached Grace as she watched the proceedings. Is it true that humans always knew your legends weren't literally true? Grace smiled. Not always. We went through our own journey of discovery, just as your people are doing now. As the Dauntless prepared to depart the next morning, Linda recorded her final observations in the ship's log. The Valdurians laughed at human legends until their own heroes spoke the truth. In that moment of honesty, our two civilizations found common ground. Perhaps the most important discovery of our mission wasn't alien technology or resources, but the recognition that growing up follows similar paths, whether for individuals or entire species. The Valdurians are facing a difficult but necessary transition, and they're doing it with remarkable courage. As we head home to Earth, we carry with us not just scientific data, but the beginning of what may become a profound friendship between worlds. Wright stood on the bridge, watching Valduria Prime grow smaller on the view screen. Set course for home, he said quietly. We have quite a story to tell.